The magnet scene isn't genius. It's one of the dumbest moments in Breaking Bad, and here's why nobody wants to admit it. For a man whose job title literally included the word security, Mike Ehrmantraut showed a curious lack of it when it came to technology. The infamous magnet stunt in Breaking Bad, a chaotic physics experiment disguised as a cover-up, becomes almost comical when one considers that Gus Fring, of all people, would have left incriminating evidence on an unencrypted laptop. This is Gus Fring, the man who hid an entire subterranean drug empire beneath a chicken restaurant. The suggestion that he failed to password protect his hard drive strains belief to the breaking point. If Mike were truly the head of security, he should have known that Gus's computer would be wrapped in enough encryption to make the NSA break out in hives. Failing that, common sense alone should have told him Gus wouldn't leave digital breadcrumbs for the DEA to follow. Yet there stood Mike, watching Walt's magnetic circus unfold, tacitly condoning a stunt that risked exposure for a reward as dubious as a coin toss. The defense often offered for Mike's apparent lapse is simple. He wasn't a computer guy, and indeed, he wasn't. Mike Ehrmantraut was a man of the analog world. Guns, surveillance, and intimidation, not firewalls and AES encryption. He wasn't shown with a laptop, likely wouldn't know how to turn one on, and probably regarded USB drives as futuristic keychains. As brilliant as he was, Mike's brilliance had a distinctly pre-digital expiration date. He could outthink gangsters, not GPUs. That much is forgivable. After all, Gus Fring didn't hire Mike to code Python. He hired him to make people disappear. But that only deepens the absurdity of the magnet plot. If Gus was half as careful as his character demanded, his laptop would have been encrypted using state-of-the-art tools available long before 2009. TrueCrypt, PGP, or even early BitLocker. With full disk encryption and a strong passphrase, the DEA could have spent the next several millennia running brute force attacks to no avail. Federal agencies like to boast about their omnipotence, but encryption is their Achilles heel. Even with the resources of the NSA, cracking a 256-bit AES key by brute force would take longer than the age of the universe. That's not hyperbole, it's math. Agencies know this, which is why they prefer to compel suspects to unlock devices rather than decrypt them. When they can't, the data remains a digital tomb. Of course, that assumes the device was properly shut down and the keys purged from memory. If the laptop was in standby, or if Gus, meticulous though he was, ever scribbled his passphrase somewhere, it could, in theory, be compromised. But that's a stretch. Fring was a perfectionist who built an empire on paranoia. The man didn't misplace pencils, let alone passwords. What makes the magnet operation especially hollow is its lack of proportion. Even if the laptop weren't encrypted, the risk-reward ratio was laughable. Mike, the man who lectured others about caution, participated in a stunt that endangered their entire operation on the mere assumption that Gus had made a rookie error. The head of security became the head of gullibility. It's tempting to excuse the inconsistency by labeling it a plot necessity, because it is. Without the magnet stunt, the DEA never uncovers the offshore accounts. The legacy costs subplot never ignites, and the show loses one of its dominoes in the chain reaction that ultimately destroys everyone involved. Yet from a logical standpoint, it's indefensible. The scene functions only because the audience is meant to suspend disbelief in the character's technical competence. Still, the debate about encryption in 2009 adds a fascinating layer of realism to this fictional blunder. Full disk encryption existed, yes, but it wasn't yet standard. Setting it up required technical skill far beyond what Mike or his crew possessed. Gus may have had a trusted specialist for such tasks. After all, he flew in German engineers to build his underground lab, but the show never bothers to clarify this. One must assume that if Gus could hire an architect fluent in secrecy, he could also find someone to tick the encrypt drive box. The irony deepens when one recalls Gus's contradictory habits. A man brilliant enough to mask a meth empire under fast food logistics, yet careless enough to hide bank account numbers behind a picture frame. It's the cognitive dissonance of genius, meticulous in operations, sloppy in sentimentality. And it's precisely that inconsistency that makes the magnet plot feel less like criminal realism and more like narrative expediency.
Even if the laptop were accessible, the question remains, how much would it really reveal? Given the sophistication of Gus's network, it's doubtful he stored sensitive data locally. The laptop was likely a viewer, not a vault, streaming security feeds rather than housing them. The incriminating material Walt feared might have been sitting comfortably on Madrigal's servers, far beyond the reach of a magnet, in an Albuquerque junkyard. Mike's limitations underscore a broader theme. In Breaking Bad, the older generation of criminals struggles to adapt to the digital age. Gus embraced technology as a tool. Mike treated it like an inconvenience. Walt, ironically, stood between them, scientifically literate, but emotionally reckless. The Magnet Caper reflects that imbalance perfectly. An old-school enforcer and a modern-day chemist trying to solve a 21st century problem with 19th century theatrics. Ultimately, the operation's greatest revelation isn't about encryption at all. It's about hubris. The scene exposes the dangerous illusion that intelligence in one domain translates to competence in all others. Gus mastered logistics, Mike mastered discipline, and Walt mastered chemistry. None of them mastered cybersecurity. And in that gap, between analog arrogance and digital ignorance, entire empires collapse. So yes, Mike Ehrmantraut may have been brilliant, just not in the language of bits and bytes. He could dismantle a car bomb blindfolded, but couldn't set up a firewall if his life depended on it. And maybe that's the point. The tragedy of these men isn't that they were stupid, it's that they were smart enough to believe they didn't need to learn anything new. As for the magnet, a perfect metaphor. A big, noisy, dangerous gesture that achieved little but chaos, just like the people who thought it would save them. Brilliance isn't enough in a world run by passwords. Subscribe and stay logged in to The Downfall.